They thought he was dead. In fact, everyone thought so. His squad, his commanding officers, even the alien soldiers who buried him under rubble during the siege of Veyros Prime. The blast should have killed him instantly. Shrapnel tearing into his chest, the building collapsing in flames, oxygen gone in moments. But he did not die. That was the first mistake the galaxy made, assuming death was a certainty when it came to humans. When the smoke cleared, alien patrols moved across the battlefield, marking fallen bodies, recording statistics. They did not even bother to finish him off. Why waste energy on a corpse? But beneath the crushing weight of steel and stone, his chest still rose. Shallow, weak, but steady. His heartbeat, faint as a whisper, refused to stop. It would have been easier if he had surrendered to the darkness then, easier to let go. But humans are not wired for easy. In those dim moments of agony, when his body screamed for release, something ancient and stubborn clawed at his mind. A voice, deep and primal, saying the words every human understands, even without language. Not yet. The galaxy had seen bravery before. It had seen species fight valiantly, stand firm, even sacrifice themselves. But it had never seen this. Someone too broken to move, too wounded to fight, too far gone to live. And yet, still refusing to let death have him. For 3 days, he lay there in silence, buried under ruins, feeding on nothing but sheer willpower. His lungs burned, his stomach twisted with hunger, his veins pulsed with fever from wounds left untreated. Still, he clung to life. And that is where the story of the man who refused to die truly began. Whispers spread first among the survivors who stumbled back into the wreckage after the battle ended. They found him, skin pale, eyes sunken, blood dried black across his uniform, but alive. Somehow impossibly alive. When they tried to carry him back, he refused. His first words after clawing back from the edge of the grave were not pleas for help. They were orders. Put me down, get the others out first. Even half dead, his priority was not himself. That was the second mistake the galaxy made in underestimating humans, assuming they lived only for themselves. It would have been one thing if his story ended there, if he had been carried to safety and healed by medics. But fate, or perhaps stubborn human nature, had other plans. For the war was not finished, and neither was he. The alien empire controlling Veyros Prime had declared the planet pacified, the human resistance broken. Yet within weeks, stories began to leak through the cracks of their propaganda. An attack on an outpost, a supply convoy raided, troops ambushed in the night, and in each story there was mention of a single figure, a human soldier, bandaged, scarred, walking with a limp, but fighting with the fury of someone who had already stared death in the face and laughed. The aliens called him the Ghost of Veyros. Their reports described him as impossible. He should not have been alive. His wounds should have killed him long ago. And yet, he was everywhere. Leading raids, sabotaging fuel depots, pulling survivors from the ruins of cities. The soldiers sent to hunt him began to fear the night. They spoke of hearing his breath in the dark, of glowing eyes in the ruins, of a shadow that would not stay down no matter how many times it was shot, burned, or blasted. Fear spread faster than fact. For the galaxy does not need truth to tremble, only the possibility that truth exists. And behind every rumor, every myth, was a man who simply refused to stop fighting. But the most terrifying part was not his survival. It was the effect he had on others. Humans who had lost all hope began to rise again. Entire resistance cells reformed around his presence. Where one man should have been a symbol of tragedy, he became instead a beacon. Proof that survival was possible. Proof that death was not absolute. Proof that, if one human could crawl out from under the weight of annihilation, then perhaps humanity itself could crawl out from under the weight of galactic conquest. Aliens did not understand it at first. They had seen martyrdom before. They had seen courage before. But this was different. This was not courage. It was defiance. Not martyrdom, but something darker, something primal. A refusal to give the universe the satisfaction of watching a human die quietly. And that defiance was contagious. It infected the resistance. It infected civilians. It even infected other species who fought alongside humans, forcing them to re-evaluate everything they thought they knew about strength. Because here was a man who had nothing left. No army, no weapons, no hope of winning. And still, he lived. Still, he fought. Still, he refused to die. The alien commanders sent more troops. They cornered him again and again. They burned villages to smoke him out. They flooded tunnels. They unleashed firestorms on entire districts. Yet every time when the flames cooled and the rubble settled, reports came back the same. He is still alive. And each time those words spread, the fear grew. For what kind of creature does not know when to die? What kind of being takes every blow the universe throws at them and still rises, bloody and broken, with fire in their eyes? The galaxy was about to learn the answer, and it would terrify them. Because this was not just one man's story, this was humanity's story, and it was only the beginning.
Legends do not form in a vacuum. They grow in the silence left by fear, in the hunger left by despair, and in the cracks left by lies. The alien empire occupying Veyros Prime had broadcast endless reports that the resistance was gone, that humanity had been broken, that order had been restored. But in every corner of the galaxy, stories of one man kept slipping through the walls of propaganda. Soldiers whispered them while on patrol. Smugglers repeated them in low tones across jump lanes. Refugees clung to them like lifelines. The Ghost of Veyros at first. The council dismissed it as mere resistance propaganda. A desperate attempt to inspire hope with a fabricated hero. After all, no one could survive the collapse of the Veyros city shield generator. No one could live with wounds so severe. It was biologically impossible. And yet, the reports continued. One night, an alien supply convoy was ambushed in the Black Ravine. Every escort ship was destroyed. The crates of weapons disappeared. Among the wreckage, one survivor swore he saw a human with bandaged arms lift a fallen beam that no ordinary soldier could move, pulling 3 others free before vanishing into the dark. Another time, a squad of alien troops was hunting through the ruins of Sector 9 when they were attacked by someone moving faster than they could track. Their commander later reported that the human fought like a dying beast, coughing blood even as he ripped the weapons from their hands and turned them against them. And the most terrifying report of all came from a base commander who ordered a scorched earth bombardment of an entire district. When the fire finally died down, a human figure staggered out of the smoke, burned, limping, yet still holding a weapon. The commander fled that day, abandoning his own men. He would later resign, haunted by what he saw. Each story spread like fire, and with each retelling, the Ghost of Veyros became less man and more myth. But myths have power. The resistance, once shattered and scattered, began to reform. Survivors came out of hiding, gathering in tunnels and ruined factories, rallying under the idea that if one human could survive the impossible, then maybe they could too. He did not have to find them. They found him. They followed him not because he asked, but because his very existence demanded it. Soon, small raids turned into organized strikes. Convoys vanished. Bases burned. Every action was pinned on the ghost, whether he was there or not. His name became a weapon sharper than any blade, a curse to the occupying forces, and a battle cry to the oppressed Dot, and the aliens began to realize something terrifying. They had not created a martyr. They had created a monster. Not a monster in the sense of cruelty or savagery, but in the sense of inevitability. A being who would not stop, who could not be killed, who did not seem to recognize the rules of life and death that bound the rest of the galaxy. Commanders argued endlessly about how to deal with him. Some said he was a single human soldier whose body had been altered by primitive but effective resilience. Others claimed he was not one man at all, but a rotating mask worn by multiple fighters, designed to keep the illusion of immortality alive. Still others whispered that he had already died, that this ghost was truly what the name suggested, a revenant walking the battlefield, immune to bullets and fire alike. But the truth was simpler. He was human, and humans did not stop. That was the detail the galaxy could never understand, and perhaps never forgive. Survival was not a miracle for humans. It was a choice. Every time he bled, every time his bones cracked, every time his lungs burned, he chose not to die. And that choice, repeated again and again, became more terrifying than any superweapon. Because weapons can be destroyed. But willpower? Willpower is immortal. By the third month of the occupation, the alien forces faced a problem they had never anticipated. They were winning every battle on paper. Their ships controlled the skies. Their troops held the cities. Their banners flew over the ruins. And yet they were losing the war. Why? Because their soldiers no longer believed they could win. The Ghost of Veyros haunted them. Patrols hesitated to enter ruins. Convoys delayed their routes out of fear of ambush. Entire squads deserted rather than face the possibility of meeting him in the dark. Fear became the real weapon of the resistance. And it was wielded by one man who should have been dead long ago. But humans are not built to stop at survival. Survival is only the beginning. The man who refused to die did more than fight back. He changed the very rules of the game. He began to target not just convoys or patrols, but communications. He hacked transmissions, broadcasting messages across the planet. His voice, hoarse but unbroken, carried through alien frequencies. You thought we would die. You thought wrong. The recording spread beyond Veyros Prime. Other human colonies intercepted them, replayed them, shared them. Soon, even in distant systems, humans heard the defiance of a man who should have been a corpse. And they felt something they had not felt in years. Hope, and hope, once lit, burns brighter than any star. The galaxy had seen human courage before. It had seen human innovation, determination, even rebellion. But what it had never seen was this: the sheer refusal of one human being to accept death as an option. Terrified them, because if one man could do this, what could an entire species do if pushed to the brink? What empire, what council, what force in the universe could withstand a species that turned death itself into an ally? The answer was simple: none. And deep within the halls of the Galactic Council, where alien leaders met in secret to discuss the human problem, voices began to tremble as they debated the unthinkable. Not whether humans could be stopped, but whether they should have ever been provoked at all, because the truth was becoming clear. The Ghost of Veyros was not just one soldier. He was a warning, and that warning was spreading across the stars. The galaxy is vast. Empires rise and fall. Fleets vanish into the dark. Entire species are forgotten with time. Normally, what happens on one war-torn planet barely registers in the halls of power light years away. But the story of the Ghost of Veyros was different. It spread not through official channels, but through whispers, rumors, intercepted transmissions, and the fearful testimony of soldiers who returned home broken not from wounds, but for nightmares. At first, alien rulers scoffed. What was one human to a galactic empire? A single soldier, no matter how stubborn, could not shift the balance of power. But as the weeks turned into months, something far more dangerous than a man began to spread. Doubt. And doubt is poison. The council In panic within the towering spires of the Galactic Council Chamber, debates grew heated. Alien leaders from dozens of worlds shouted over one another, their voices echoing against marble walls, polished with centuries of peacekeeping authority. One delegate hissed, "You do not understand what humans are. They are predators in every sense. This ghost proves it. Kill one and 100 rise. Kill 100, and the rest only grow stronger." Another slammed a clawed fist on the table. "Nonsense! This is exaggeration. A campfire tale. No biological being can withstand such punishment. If humans could truly defy death, they would have conquered the galaxy centuries ago." A third leaned forward, her scaled skin shimmering under the lights. "Perhaps they already have, just not with ships and fleets. They conquer through fear, through stories. The Ghost of Veyros has spread farther than any army could march. And fear." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Fear topples empires." The chamber fell silent. They all knew she was right. Empires are not destroyed only by warships and weapons. Sometimes they are destroyed by belief, by the idea that their enemies cannot be defeated. And in that silence, every leader in the chamber felt the same chill. The Ghost of Veyros was no longer a man. He was an idea. The alien soldiers' fear, meanwhile, on the ground, the effect was devastating. Patrols hesitated to leave their bases at night. Convoy guards flinched at shadows. Every ruined building became a possible ambush site, and the stories kept growing. One alien soldier, interviewed after deserting his post, said, "We cornered him. 5 of us. He was bleeding, gasping, barely able to stand. We thought it was over. But then he smiled, actually smiled and charged. My friend shot him in the chest. He kept coming. Another hit him in the leg. He limped forward, still coming. We panicked. We ran. I do not know if he lived or died that day. I only know that no living thing should be able to do that. And yet he did." The soldier never returned to service. He spent the rest of his life haunted by that memory. And he was not the only one. The ghost became more than an enemy. He became a nightmare, something soldiers saw in their minds, even when they were safe in their bunks, not hope for the broken. But if the ghost terrified the invaders, he gave life to the oppressed. For every alien soldier who saw him as a demon, there were 100 humans who saw him as a savior. Families in hiding told their children bedtime stories about him. "The ghost is still out there," mothers whispered, "fighting for us. As long as he breathes, we are not finished." Resistance fighters painted his symbol on walls 2 crossed lines, meant to represent defiance. Colonists lit fires in the ruins to honor his survival. Entire underground movements spread, uniting not under generals or governments, but under the story of one man who refused to die. And that was the true danger, because empires can crush armies. They can destroy fleets, but they cannot kill an idea once it takes root. Shifting the balance, soon the ghost's defiance spread beyond humanity. Other species, long oppressed by the empire, began to take notice. A small rebellion on the mining world of Rithel carved his symbol into their banners. Smugglers whispered his name when negotiating trade routes, using it as a sign of courage. Even alien slaves on distant planets prayed not to gods, but to the thought of the human who would not die. It was then that the Council realized their mistake. They had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, not technology, not numbers, not even courage, but stubbornness. The unyielding refusal to accept defeat. The ghost embodied that stubbornness in its purest form. And for the first time in centuries, the balance of galactic power began to shift. Not because humanity had fleets or superweapons, but because the galaxy itself began to believe they could not be destroyed. The ghost himself, through all of this, the ghost remained unaware of the full scope of his legend. To him, It was simple. Every day was survival. He was not a hero in his mind. He was just a soldier who refused to stop breathing. He still woke up bleeding. His bones still ached from old wounds. His lungs burned with every breath. And yet, every morning he rose and continued the fight. When asked by a resistance fighter once why he kept going, he gave a simple answer: because they want me dead. And until I am, I win. Those words spread almost as fast as the stories of his survival. They became a creed, a motto, a mantra for soldiers across the galaxy. The turning point by the 4th month of the occupation, the alien commanders faced a crisis. Despite overwhelming control, they had lost the war of morale. Soldiers no longer trusted victory. Colonies no longer submitted out of fear. Rebellions ignited across multiple systems, all claiming inspiration from the Ghost. The Council debated escalating using weapons of mass destruction to annihilate entire human populations. But some among them hesitated. If they did that, what would the galaxy see? That humans had been exterminated? Or that humans had resisted so hard, so unrelentingly, that genocide had become the only option left? The second message was far more dangerous, because it would prove, beyond all doubt, that humans were not weak. They were the most dangerous species alive. And so the Council stalled, trapped between fear and pride. While the legend of the Ghost continued to grow unchecked, the whisper in the dark, the galaxy had seen warriors. It had seen martyrs. It had seen heroes. But never before had it seen this. A man who defied the natural order, who fought not for glory or conquest, but because he simply refused to stop existing. He was not a hero in shining armor. He was not a chosen one. He was something far scarier. He was human. And humans, the galaxy was learning, do not die quietly. The Ghost of Veyros had become more than a man. He was a story. And stories, once told, can never truly die. And somewhere in the ruins of Veyros Prime, the man himself sat by a dim fire, his body broken but his spirit unyielding, never realizing that his refusal to die was not just keeping him alive, it was keeping humanity alive. The galaxy trembled, though not from weapons or fleets. It trembled from whispers, rumors, passed in hushed tones through barracks, marketplaces, and council chambers. The Ghost of Veyros had grown into something far beyond human flesh. But myths, no matter how powerful, always face one test, the moment when legend meets reality. And that moment came when the Empire decided enough was enough. The alien high command devised a plan, not out of strategy, but out of desperation. If they could kill the Ghost publicly, if they could drag his broken body before cameras and scatter his ashes to the void, perhaps they could end the myth once and for all. So they set the trap. They leaked information through false defectors, whispering of a hidden resistance cache deep in the ruins of Veyros Prime. Ammunition, food, safe shelter. They knew the Ghost could not resist. His body might still ache, but his mind was sharp. He would seize any chance to arm the survivors, to strike back. And so they baited the hook. For 3 nights, he watched from the shadows. He studied patrol routes, counted the timing of drones, and memorized every angle of the streets. His instincts screamed something was wrong. But the survivors were starving. Ammunition was nearly gone. He had no choice. When the moment came, he slipped through the ruins, his scarred body moving with painful determination. He reached the cache, and the walls exploded with light. Hundreds of alien soldiers encircled him, weapons trained, drones hovering, cameras broadcasting across the Empire. The trap had been sprung. The broadcast all across the Empire, citizens watched. Soldiers tuned in from bunkers and warships. Slaves on distant worlds crowded around flickering screens. Humans in hiding froze in terror. On the broadcast, The ghost stood in the center of a broken plaza, surrounded by soldiers. His clothes were tattered, his body gaunt, his wounds poorly healed. He should have looked weak. He should have looked defeated, but his eyes burned, and that was all it took. The alien commander stepped forward, voice amplified by a speaker. "This creature has haunted our forces long enough. Look at him. He is no ghost, no demon, just a broken animal. Tonight his story ends." The soldiers raised their weapons. The camera zoomed in. Across the galaxy, millions leaned forward, waiting for the end of the legend. But then, something happened. The ghost laughed. The defiance it was not a gentle laugh. It was raw, cracked, pulled from lungs that had endured smoke and blood. But it was laughter all the same. "You think you've won?" He rasped, his voice echoing in the plaza. "You think surrounding me means the end? No, it means you're afraid. It means you know what I am. You can kill me, but you cannot kill what I've shown the galaxy. I am one man, and I'm still here. What does that make you?" Silence. Not just in the plaza, but across the galaxy. Soldiers on ships hesitated. Civilians watching at home felt their hearts pound. Even alien leaders in their chambers felt unease crawl across their skin. The commander snarled, "End him?" But as the order left his mouth, something cracked in the ranks. A soldier at the perimeter lowered his weapon. Another hesitated, his eyes darting between the ghost and his commander. The myth had sunk too deep. And then chaos erupted. The battle in the plaza, the ghost moved first. A stolen blade glinted as he lunged at the nearest soldier, his broken body fueled by sheer will. The soldiers fired wildly, but their fear ruined their aim. The crowd erupted into confusion, some firing at the ghost, others at each other. Explosions tore through the plaza as resistance fighters, who had secretly shadowed him, launched their own ambush. They had suspected a trap and followed, unwilling to let their symbol fall alone. The cameras kept rolling. What was meant to be the Empire's greatest victory became its greatest humiliation. The ghost fought like a man possessed, striking, bleeding, falling, and rising again. Even when hit, even when thrown down, he clawed back to his feet. The broadcast could not hide it. Every viewer saw the truth. He was not invincible. He was not immortal. But he was unstoppable. And that was far worse. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. On mining worlds, oppressed laborers dropped their tools and revolted. On prison colonies, riots broke out. On alien homeworlds, dissidents shouted his name in the streets. Even within the Empire's own military, doubt hardened into rebellion. The ghost had proven it on camera. Humans do not surrender. Even in a trap, even surrounded, even broken and bleeding, they fight until the universe itself has to rip them apart. The council panicked. They ordered the broadcast cut, but it was too late. Smugglers and rebels had already captured the signal and spread it across every channel. The story was no longer theirs to control. The Ghost of Veyros had become the spark for a galaxy-wide fire. The aftermath, the plaza was left in ruins. Hundreds of soldiers lay dead. The commander was executed by his own panicked troops. And though the ghost was dragged from the wreckage, bleeding and barely conscious, he had not died. He refused to. The Empire had its chance. They had their trap. They had their moment to end the legend. Instead, they made him eternal. Because in trying to prove he was only a man, they had proven he was more than one. He was every human, every rebel, every being in the galaxy who refused to bow. And from that day forward, the Empire would never know peace again. The whisper as the dust settled. A resistance fighter knelt beside him, her voice trembling. "You should have died 10 times tonight. Why do you keep fighting?" The ghost opened his eyes, bloody, but still burning with fire. His words were quiet, but they carried across the ruins, carried through the whispers of survivors, carried through the stories that would never stop spreading. "Because they want me to give up," he whispered, "and I never will." The Plaza of Veyros had become a graveyard of the Empire's arrogance. Smoke still rose from the ruins. Bodies smoldered where plasma fire had burned too hot, and the air stank of ozone and blood. Yet amid the wreckage, one figure still breathed. Barely. The Ghost of Veyros lay against shattered stone, his chest rising in ragged gasps, his face pale beneath streaks of blood and ash. His body was broken again, but his spirit was not. That was the curse of the human race, the curse the galaxy had yet to understand. As long as one breath remained, surrender was not an option, and the galaxy had seen it. The broadcast that was meant to humiliate him had instead immortalized him. He was no longer just a man. He was a story, a spark, a symbol the Empire could never erase. The rise of the fire. In the weeks that followed, rebellion erupted like wildfire. Entire star systems rose against their alien overlords. Slaves armed themselves with stolen tools and turned them into weapons. Soldiers deserted, ashamed of serving a regime that could not even break a single human. The Empire unleashed terror to crush. The uprising scorched planets, executed entire villages, silenced anyone who whispered the ghost's name. But it was too late. His defiance had already burrowed into the hearts of billions. And the greatest irony? The Empire itself had lit the flame God by broadcasting his survival, by showing their failure to end him. They had proven the very thing they wanted to die, that humans do not surrender. Even when they should, the ghost became more than human. He became inevitability. The alien perspective in secret chambers of the Galactic Council, alien leaders argued. Some demanded extermination. Others urged caution. But one voice, old and weary, spoke words that sent chills through the room. "You do not understand them. None of us do. You think they fight to win. You think they fight for survival. But they fight for something else entirely. They fight because they refuse not to. Even if victory is impossible, they claw at it anyway. That is what makes them monsters. That is what makes them unstoppable." Silence followed. For though the council members hated humans, deep in their hearts, they knew the truth of those words. The ghost's legacy. As for the ghost, he never saw himself as immortal. He never saw himself as a symbol. He was just a soldier who refused to stop breathing. He healed slowly, his body a map of scars. But instead of hiding, he went back to the front lines. Every time the Empire thought him gone, he appeared again leading raids, saving civilians, pulling victory from hopeless battles. The galaxy began to believe he could not die, that perhaps humans had evolved beyond mortality itself. But the truth was far more terrifying. He could die. He should die. But he simply refused to, and that made him more terrifying than any immortal could ever be. The whisper that spread among human rebels. There was a phrase that began to pass from mouth to mouth, painted on walls, scratched into the dirt, whispered before desperate battles. "If the ghost breathes, so can we." It became the mantra of a revolution, a reminder that no matter how broken, no matter how battered, survival was still a choice. And to the Empire's horror, that mantra spread beyond humanity. Other species, long enslaved or crushed under alien rule, began to rise too. The ghost was not just a human story anymore. He was a universal one, the final stand, but every story must reach its end. The Empire, cornered and desperate, unleashed one final assault. They sent fleets the size of moons. They leveled cities, burned forests, poisoned oceans. Their goal was no longer victory, it was annihilation. If they could not control humanity, they would erase it. And at the heart of the storm, The ghost stood again. His body was frail, his years of war etched deep into his bones. Yet he stood on the battlefield, rifle in hand, gaze unbroken. Around him, soldiers, human and alien alike, looked to him as their anchor. He had become more than a fighter. He had become the soul of the resistance. The battle raged for days. Firestorms tore across the skies. Fleets clashed in orbit. Entire continents shook under the weight of war. And yet, every time his allies faltered, every time despair threatened to take them, the ghost's voice cut through the chaos. Not yet. 2 words. The same words he had whispered when buried under rubble, when choking on blood, when staring into the abyss. 2 words that held back death itself, the end that was not an end, when the battle was finally over. When the Empire's fleets were shattered and their armies broken, the ghost lay again among the ruins. His body was still, his breath shallowed out, and for the first time, even his allies thought perhaps his story had reached its end. But then his chest rose, and across the battlefield, soldiers cheered through tears, not because he would live forever, but because he had proven once again that death could not take him without a fight. And in that moment, the Empire's defeat was sealed. Because no matter what happened next, no matter how many battles were still to come, humanity had already won, not through strength, not through strategy, but through something no alien had ever understood, the refusal to surrender. The truth of humanity years later. Historians would argue whether the Ghost of Veyros was truly immortal, or whether his story had grown larger than life. Some claimed he lived long after the war, fighting in secret. Others believed he finally fell, body too broken to continue. But the truth did not matter, because by then he was no longer a man. He was a lesson written into the galaxy's memory. Humans are not feared because they are strong. They are feared because they do not stop. And the ghost was proof of it. The man who should have died, who could not die, who refused to die, the man who became every human, the man who showed the galaxy why humanity survives when no one else can, the man who taught them all the most dangerous truth of the universe. Against all odds, against all reason, against the very will of death itself, humans endure, and they always will.